I didn't say a word. I just stood there in the middle of my brother's rehearsal dinner, with 73 people watching me, and I felt my face go completely still. That's the thing nobody tells you about humiliation. It doesn't feel like fire, it feels like ice water. Everything slows down. The noise drops out. And suddenly you're the only person in the room who can hear your own heartbeat. My mother's hand was still raised when I looked at her. Not at the guests, not at my brother. At her. And she looked, I don't know how to describe it. She looked satisfied, like she'd finally said the thing she'd been holding for years. I picked up my clutch from the table. I smoothed my dress, and I walked out. That was 8 months ago. I've had a lot of time to think about what led to that moment. About how a family dinner can turn into an ambush. About how the word family can be used like a crowbar to pry open things that belong only to you. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Lauren. I'm 31 years old. I'm a contracts attorney at a mid-size firm in Dallas, and I have been since I passed the bar on my first try at 26. I mention that not to brag, I mention it because it matters to what comes later. My family has always had a complicated relationship with my success. They acknowledge it when it's useful to them, and they minimize it when it isn't. I grew up in a suburb outside of Fort Worth. 3 kids, me, my older brother, and my younger sister. I was the middle one. My brother is 40 now, works in HVAC sales, has a good life. My sister is 27, engaged as of last spring, works at a boutique. We were never a particularly close family in the emotional sense, but we showed up for things. Holidays, birthdays, the occasional Sunday dinner. I thought that was enough. After law school, I moved to Dallas for work. I rented a small apartment in Uptown for 2 years while I paid down my loans aggressively. I'm talking rice and beans, aggressive, skipping vacations, driving a 2012 Honda Civic with a busted AC through 2 Texas summers. By the time I was 29, my loans were gone. By 30, I had enough for a down payment. I bought a condo in a high-rise in the design district. 11th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, 2 bedrooms. I paid 30% down in cash and signed the mortgage myself. No cosigner, no family money, no help. I remember sitting in the parking lot of the title company after closing, eating a gas station sandwich, feeling like I could cry. That condo was mine. Every square foot of it. I didn't grow up with money. My parents are comfortable now. My dad retired from 28 years with the city. My mom worked in school administration, but we were firmly middle class and there were years when things were tight. I watched them struggle. Which is partly why I work the way I did. I never wanted to be in that position. I never wanted to have to ask anyone for anything. For 2 years, I lived in that condo and I was genuinely happy. I had my work, my friends, my Saturday morning routine of coffee and the farmer's market 2 blocks away. My family visited twice. My mom said it was a lot of space for one person. I let that go. Then my brother got engaged. Her name is Stephanie, and I want to be fair here. I don't have anything personal against Stephanie. She's fine. She's perfectly pleasant. But she and my brother have what I would describe as a very champagne taste. Beer budget situation. They live in a nice apartment in Fort Worth that my parents quietly help them with every month. I only found out about that later. My brother drives a truck that, by my estimate, has payments somewhere around $800 a month. Stephanie doesn't work full-time. This is not a judgment, it's context. The engagement happened in November. The wedding was set for the following October. I was asked to be a bridesmaid. I said yes. I bought my dress, I showed up to the engagement party, I sent a gift. I was doing everything right. The dinner happened in February. My parents called it a wedding planning dinner, just the immediate family at their house in Fort Worth. I drove out on a Saturday, brought a bottle of wine and a box of my mom's favorite cookies from a bakery in Dallas she likes. I thought it was going to be a normal dinner. We sat down. My dad grilled steaks. My mom made her green bean casserole. My brother and Stephanie sat across from me. My sister and her fiancé were there too. We talked about the venue, a barn-style reception hall outside Weatherford. Nice place. We talked about the menu, the guest list, the centerpieces. Then my mom said, we also wanted to talk about something before the big day gets closer. And something in my stomach shifted. I don't know what it was. Some animal instinct. I set down my fork. We've been thinking, my dad started, and we feel like, well, you know Stephanie and your brother don't have a lot of room right now. Their apartment is only a one-bedroom, and after the wedding, they're going to need space. I nodded slowly. We were thinking, my mom said, that you could let them stay in your condo while they save up, just temporarily. Silence. You mean my condo, I said. Just for a year or two. While you could rent somewhere smaller, Lauren. You're there by yourself. You don't need 1,100 square feet. I want to describe this moment carefully because I think people on the outside sometimes think, well, why didn't you just say no and move on? And the answer is that when you've been in a family dynamic your whole life, the request doesn't come at you straight. It comes wrapped in layers. There's the ask, and then underneath it is the implication that you're selfish if you refuse. And underneath that is the history of every time you were called too independent or too focused on yourself. And underneath that is this bedrock belief your family has held forever, that your success is a shared resource that belongs to all of them. You want me to move out of the condo I own? I said, so that my brother and his fiancée can live there. We're not saying permanently. How would that work with the mortgage? I asked. I'm still paying a mortgage on it. You're asking me to pay a mortgage on a home I'm not living in while I also pay rent somewhere else. My brother leaned forward. Lauren, it's not a big deal. You make good money. That's not the point. It kind of is, though, Stephanie said quietly. And that was the moment I felt the first real flash of anger. Because Stephanie, who I had welcomed, who I had bought an engagement gift for, who I had stood next to at the engagement party and smiled, was sitting at my parents' dinner table making a case for taking my home. You could charge us something, my brother offered. We'd pay you. Like a reduced rent. You want to rent my condo from me, my condo that I own, at a reduced rate, while I pay full rent somewhere else. Lauren, why do you have to make everything so complicated? My mom said. And there it was. The oldest line in the book. You're making this complicated. No. I'm describing the situation accurately. I told them I would think about it. That was a lie. I said it to end the conversation, to get through the rest of dinner without things escalating. We ate my mom's apple pie. We talked about other things. I drove home to Dallas at 10:30 that night, called my best friend from the car and said, I need you to talk me down before I do something I can't undo. She talked me down. I decided I was going to handle this quietly. I would send an email, written like the attorney I am, declining clearly and explaining my position. Firm, respectful, final. I sent that email 4 days later. I spent 3 days drafting it. It was 2 paragraphs, clear, factual, unemotional. I said I was not able to make my condo available, that my financial obligations were tied to that property, and that I wished them the best in finding a solution for their housing. The response I got from my mom was 6 paragraphs long. The summary was, I was being selfish. My brother had always supported me. Family helps family. Was I really going to let money come before blood? Then the phone call started. My dad called twice. My brother called once, and that conversation got heated enough that I had to hang up. My aunt, my mom's sister, who had nothing to do with any of this, texted me to say she was disappointed in me. I stopped responding. I showed up to the bridal shower in April because I had RSVP and I keep my word. It was fine. Strained, but fine. My mom hugged me when I arrived like nothing had happened, which is its own kind of gaslighting. We did not discuss the condo. The rehearsal dinner was in September. The wedding was the next afternoon at 4 o'clock. I had booked a hotel room in Weatherford for the weekend, 2 nights, so I wouldn't have to drive back and forth. I got to the rehearsal dinner venue, a private room at a steakhouse, at 6:30, wearing a green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Everything was normal for about 45 minutes. Then my mom caught my eye across the table and said, Lauren, can you come help me in the hallway for a second? I should have known. I followed her out. My dad was already there. My brother came out a minute later. The 3 of them standing in a hotel hallway, and me realizing I had walked into the same room, different location. We just want to revisit the condo situation, my dad said. I could not believe it. At the rehearsal dinner, we've been trying to reach you. I've been clear. I said no. I'm not changing my mind. Lauren? My mom's voice had that tone, the one she uses when she thinks I'm being childish. You have so much. You have a career. You have savings. You have a beautiful home. Why is it so hard to share with your family? I'm not sharing my home. I'm not doing this. I turned to go back inside. That's when my mom grabbed my arm. I turned back, and I don't know what she saw on my face. Maybe she saw that I was finally, genuinely done, but instead of letting go, she raised her voice. You have always been like this, she said, always putting yourself first. Your whole life. Your brother is getting married, and you can't do one thing. I've done plenty. You are so selfish. And then she slapped me. Not a hard slap. Not a slap that left a mark. But she raised her hand and she made contact with my cheek, right there in the hallway of the restaurant. And 3 feet behind her was the open doorway to the private dining room where 73 people, family, friends, my brother's co-workers, had a direct line of sight to exactly what had just happened. Dead silence. And then my brother said, quietly, Mom. I stood there for 1 full second, maybe 2. I was aware of my own breathing. I was aware of the sound of a chair scraping somewhere behind me. I was aware that my cheek was warm. I did not cry. I did not yell. I looked at my mother and I said, very calmly, don't ever touch me again. Then I walked back to the table. I picked up my clutch. I said to no one in particular, enjoy the evening, and I walked out the front door of that steakhouse and stood on the sidewalk under the Texas sky and texted my hotel to confirm early check-in. What I did not know, what I had no way of knowing, was that one of the people seated near that doorway was a woman named Dr. Patricia Mullen. Dr. Mullen is a county family court judge. She had been invited as a guest of my future sister-in-law, a college friend of Stephanie's I had never met. She had watched the entire hallway scene from about 6 feet away. I didn't know any of that night. I checked into my hotel room, ordered room service, took a shower, and went to sleep by 9:30. I turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to 41 missed messages. I want to describe the particular experience as scrolling through 41 messages when you know some of them are going to be unpleasant. You brace yourself. You organize them first in your head. Okay, damage assessment. My brother. My mom. My aunt. A cousin I haven't spoken to in 2 years who apparently got a full briefing. My best friend who just sent 3 question marks. And then, near the bottom, a number I didn't recognize. A text that said, Hi Lauren, you don't know me, but my name is Patricia Mullen. I was at the rehearsal dinner last night. I'm a judge in Tarrant County. I'd like to talk to you when you have a moment. I sat up straighter. I called the number back within 10 minutes. Judge Mullen picked up on the second ring. She was warm and direct, the way people who deal with high-stakes situations professionally tend to be. She told me she had seen what happened. She told me that what my mother had done constituted assault under Texas law, that regardless of family relationship, physical contact made in anger without consent is a criminal matter, and that in a public setting with multiple witnesses, it was documented whether I pursued it or not. She wasn't telling me what to do, she was making sure I knew I had options. She also told me something else. She said that Stephanie was a former student of hers. She taught a community class years ago, and that she'd always thought well of her, but that she was troubled by what she'd witnessed, and that if there were any legal matters that came up surrounding the incident, she was willing to speak to what she'd seen. I thanked her. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a long time after I hung up. I didn't go to the wedding. I know that's the part some people will have opinions about, but here's how I thought about it. I had been physically struck by my mother in front of 73 people the night before the ceremony. I had been ambushed at a family event. The people who should have immediately pulled my mother aside and said what you did was wrong, my dad, my brother, had instead, based on their texts, spent the night running interference on my mother's behalf and asking me to just move past it so the day wouldn't be ruined. My presence at that wedding was optional for me. It was not optional for the people getting married. The day would proceed whether I was there or not. I sent my brother a text that morning. I said, I love you and I wish you and Stephanie well. I'm not able to be there today. I hope you understand. He didn't respond. I didn't expect him to. I drove back to Dallas. I stopped at a diner outside of Burleson and had the best eggs and biscuits I'd had in years because adversity makes food taste different. I put on a podcast. I drove home with the windows down. Over the next 2 months, I did 3 things. First, I talked to a therapist. Not for the first time, I'd done therapy in my mid-20s, but I went back and specifically worked through this. The gaslighting, the patterns I'd been too close to see clearly, the way my family had systematically treated my success as a communal asset, while never extending the same logic in reverse. My therapist, who is excellent, said something I've thought about a lot since. You were raised to believe that love and access to you were the same thing. They are not. Second, I formally documented the incident. I wrote out a detailed account, had it notarized, and kept it. I also, very quietly, consulted a colleague at my firm about my options regarding the assault. He told me I had a solid case if I wanted to pursue it. I have not decided yet, but I have the documentation. Third, I set terms. I sent a letter written on my firm's letterhead because I wanted the tone to be absolutely unambiguous to my parents. I told them that I would not be in contact until I received a written apology from my mother for what she'd done. Not a verbal apology in person, where she could cry and I'd feel obligated to hug her. A written one, where she had to sit down and put into words exactly what she understood had happened and why it was wrong. I haven't received it. It's been 8 months. My sister calls occasionally. She doesn't bring up the wedding, which I appreciate. My dad sent a short email 2 months ago that said he was sorry things had gotten out of hand and that he hoped I'd reconsider cutting off the family. I wrote back and explained very simply that I hadn't cut off anyone. I had set a condition. The condition remained unmet. My brother and Stephanie, I've been told, are renting a 2-bedroom in Fort Worth. They appear to be fine. My condo is still mine. 11th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows. Last Saturday morning I made coffee and stood at the window and watched the light come up over the design district and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Quiet. Real, actual quiet. Not the absence of noise, the absence of dread. I used to spend so much energy managing my family's feelings about my life, minimizing my own success so they wouldn't feel the gap, showing up to things even when I could feel the resentment underneath the surface, being agreeable past the point of honesty because I thought that was what love required. I don't think that anymore. The slap wasn't the worst thing that happened to me in that hallway. The worst thing was that it wasn't surprising. Some part of me had seen it coming for years. Not the physical part, but the moment of rupture. The moment where the thing we'd all been pretending wasn't there finally broke through the surface. In a strange way, I'm grateful for that night. Not for the act. Not for what my mother did, which was wrong, which I have never minimized and will never be asked to, but for the clarity it gave me. For the way it made a decision I'd been circling for years suddenly simple. There is a version of this story where I am the villain, where I'm the cold, successful daughter who couldn't sacrifice one thing for her family, who let a little slap blow up her relationships over pride. I have heard that version. It has been emailed to me by relatives I barely know. Here's what I know to be true. I worked for 8 years to build a life that was mine. I paid my taxes and my mortgage and my bar dues. I showed up to every family event I was invited to. I was never unkind, and where my family decided that the logical outcome of my effort was that they had a claim on it. That my property, my space, my life was something I should hand over because I happened to be successful and they happened to need it, I said no. That no was not a failure of love. That no was love for myself. Probably the first uncomplicated version of it I had ever allowed. My mom's hand was still raised when I looked at her. And in that moment, before I said a word, before I picked up my clutch and walked out, I made a decision. I decided I was done apologizing for the life I had built. I'm still not sorry. I've spent a lot of time since that night thinking about cause and effect. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly the way you do when you're driving alone and the radio is off and your mind goes somewhere honest. My mother didn't slap me because she had a bad night. She slapped me because she had spent years believing that my success came with an unwritten clause, that whatever I built was partly hers to direct. That belief didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built, slowly, over decades of small moments where I said yes when I should have said no, where I softened my edges to make the room more comfortable, where I let comments about my apartment being too much space for one person pass without challenge. I trained them in a way, not intentionally, but I did. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. Not what my mother did. That's on her, fully, and I don't carry it as my fault. But the years before that night, the patterns I participated in, the version of myself I kept small so the family dynamic could stay intact, that's what I've had to look at honestly. The condo wasn't really about the condo. My brother and Stephanie needed housing, yes, but the ask was never purely practical. It was a test of whether my success was truly mine or whether it belonged to the family the moment they needed it. And when I failed that test, when I said no and meant it, the punishment was public humiliation. That's what happens when people confuse love with access. When they believe that family means your boundaries don't count. What I know now, and what I wish I'd understood 23-year-old Lauren, sitting in a cramped apartment eating ramen and studying case law, the discipline it takes to build a life is exactly the same discipline it takes to protect one. You can't fight for something for 8 years and then hand it over because someone raised their voice. That's not generosity, that's just fear, with a nicer name. Judge Mullen called me because she saw something wrong and she had the standing to speak to it. She didn't know me. She owed me nothing. And yet cause and effect. My mother chose a public place. She chose to make her anger visible, and the consequence of that choice was that the wrong person was watching, not punishment from the sky, just the simple, unremarkable logic of actions and their outcomes. I think about Lauren at 32. The one who stood in that hallway with her cheek warm and her hand steady, and I think she did the only intelligent thing available to her. She didn't perform, she didn't collapse. She didn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. She picked up her clutch, and she left. And in doing so, she protected the one thing that night could not take from her, her own composure. Her own composure. Her own clarity. Her own sense of what she deserved. Integrity is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up in the moments when it costs something, and it either holds or it doesn't. That night, it held. I'm not the villain of this story. I'm also not a saint. I'm just a woman who worked hard, drew a line and didn't move it. That's not a small thing. For a lot of people, in a lot of families, that is the hardest thing there is.